All right, no regard, so let's go move. Welcome to F1.
Ready to
No.
the brand new world, ready to the brand new trip.
Around the world.
That's our law.
So
Oh.
free shirt. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing our merch. So let me show you what the shirt
Yes,
looks
it
like,
exists, everybody. Look
Oh.
at that.
Going for that nice Miami Vice.
Oh yeah, it exists. But
It is I, Ms. Vanna Black, showing
it is
you.
in progress. Yeah. They will be available at some point in the near future, so don't you
Yes.
worry about that.
Yeah, I know we keep dropping
Right.
hints, but yes, it is real. It exists. These are samples, so we're just
Yeah.
trying to, stretching them out, seeing how
Right.
we can dance in it, seeing how we twerk in it, that kind of thing,
I did that one reel I did about the Ferrari racing in blue. I was wearing my other F1 or F off shirt. Nobody clocked it.
Oh, okay.
So
Well, maybe someone who can
May-
tell us what the No Regrets, So Let's Go move is from, might get some merch. So
yeah.
I don't know.
There you
We're not
go.
gonna say anything else about
We
that.
make a
one.
lot of promises.
Yeah, we
We make a lot of promises.
it's like I say, overpromise and underdeliver.
That's
just be
right. Yes, that's
aggressively average as possible.
That is right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what we're all about here. Average.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to F1 or F off, your audio pit stop for F1
Foo-foo.
news and race reviews. My name is Gabe. I am your host, along with my co-host, Idris. Hello, Idris.
Hi. Hi.
Yeah. How was your week? What'd you get up to?
Week was lit, man. A lot of really fun stuff this week. Let's see. I mean, all right. So actually, I'm just saying that. Let me think about it. Yeah. No, this was a good week. Yeah. So here in Central Ohio, it is getting nice and toasty. Finally getting nice outside. So spending a lot of time with loved ones and whatnot, enjoying nature, hikes, walking, all that kind of stuff. Because
Yeah.
it has been wild, like weather-wise out here, where it feels like the environment can't make up its mind. So
Yeah.
thank you, climate change. So what is it like in Portland? I mean, because I know you guys. I think what's normal for you guys now out there is just the heat dome, right? Like that's just a thing.
Yeah. It's like it used to be like, fairly consistent. Like you would get a pretty consistent raining, kind of overcast, and then once spring broke, into summer, then it was just like really pleasant sun, but it was never super hot. Like you get those
Yeah.
hotter days, but it would be like, maybe 80 something, but yeah, recently it's just it's been kind of we had a few summers ago where it was just a bone dry winter, which is just not great, because you don't want that, because then what ended up happening was that because there was no moisture set into the trees and into the ground, everything dried out really fast,
Yeah.
and then we just had these really intense heat waves, and then some ding dong decided to set off fireworks in the forest,
They fun.
and then it literally it just set the entire
Yeah.
forest on fire in the gorge, and
Yeah,
so
that's
we had
unfortunate.
like just covered in smoke. So, anytime anybody comes out here, it's like, I hate the rain, I'm so tired of it. I'm just like, no,
it serves a
because
purpose.
I would rather deal with an excessive amount of rain, that as long as it doesn't get to flooding. If it's just an excessive amount of rainy season, that's good, because that just prolongs any sort of, heat wave that we get. So yeah, we're just getting these just big old domes of heat in the summer,
Yeah.
and then it's it's wild.
So here's the other thing, like you just said. Why are you moving to Portland if you don't like rain? Not you, but like the figurative, the general you. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like
Yeah.
that's what the Pacific Northwest is. It's like
Yeah.
the marine layer. Like that's
Yeah.
same with San Francisco. Like that's just what it is out there. So
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and that's what's funny. It's like I moved to Portland because I wanted to be in the rain, Like I liked, because the rain is different out here, Like I remember when I was out
It just
there
hit
last
different.
with you. Yeah, well, like remember when I was out there with you last time, and we went to
Yeah.
Aldi's, and then we go
Yeah.
outside and it was raining, but it was like hot rain. And I was
Yes.
like, what
that
is
is
this?
that is something people like who are not from the Midwest, I think, do not understand, right? Like hot rain. Like it is.
Yeah.
It's such a cool, interesting phenomena It is. Yeah, there's like no more Cleveland thing than that I can think of,
Yeah, it's just like
other
warm
than
rain.
crippling
It's like,
depression.
yeah, right. But like, out here, instead of getting like dirty lake water, you get rained on by like cool, warm, or like cool, like crisp sort of mountain
Mm,
water.
mm,
So it just feels more refreshing. It smells better, So
yeah.
so I ain't mad at it. But
Yeah. So guys,
um
this is actually our soft launch of our new podcast that we're calling Weather Time with Idris and Gabe.
weather
So
time.
with
It's just
Idris
like
and Gabe.
you have that like
Got like a nice
smooth, like, rolling jazz, like
mm,
boom,
yeah.
boom, boom,
Hey ladies, this is your host
boom,
Idris from
boom,
Z1076, and here we talk about the weather. Is it wet? Is it warm? I don't know, baby. Let's keep listening in. It's cloudy with a chance of meatballs, baby.
Cloudy with a chance of smooth jazz. Um,
I mean,
well,
we've gone off
honestly, though,
script.
if you want to talk about rain, let's talk about the deluge
Mm,
of just
mm,
controversy news that has just cascaded upon us
mm.
this week in honestly in two of our favorite series. Obviously, there's been a ton of F1 news, but there's also been a insane amount of IndyCar
Oh
news
yeah.
too,
Oh
which we're going to
yes.
touch base on. But first ups first, let's talk about F1. And honestly, I'm not even going to tease
Just
it. We're
rip the
just going to
band-aid
jump
off.
right in, ripping the band-aid off.
Yeah.
Adrian Newey is leaving Red Bull.
Yeah, I mean, if okay, so for those of you who follow our socials on Instagram and TikTok, we posted this clip of me just pointing at the news article and me just maniacally laughing because
Hmm.
I think that's all that needs to be said, right?
Yeah.
To everyone, this is literally the monkey's paw, like curling a finger, right? You're like, oh, I want to change in the championship, and then it's like,
Hmm.
okay, all right,
Okay, here it
just
is.
one finger curls in, you're like,
Yes,
oh,
yeah.
oh, but not like this though, right? And wow, this is huge, right? Um, I think initial thoughts kind of lead you to recent recent events, right? There's been a lot of drama and a lot of spillage coming from the Red Bull camp, right?
Hmm.
Because of this whole Christian Horner affair scenario, right?
Right.
What we've come to find out this week is that apparently it was Christian Horner's PA who was wait, PA, I'm sorry, PR representative or whatever, his admin, right?
Right.
Executive admin, who also worked with Adrian Newey. So you can imagine that Adrian's finding out about this and he's like, "What? You're treating her this way?"
Yeah.
So probably not super happy. So he probably is kind of done with the drama. He
Hmm.
doesn't want to be around that anymore, and it's so sad to see like the end of like a work relationship happen because of this, right? Not
Right.
saying that it shouldn't happen. Like, no, it like for sure he was very upset about this. He's like, I'm gonna hopefully with the best of intention, he's like, I'm stepping away from this team because that's really disgusting how you traded her, right?
Mm.
I hope that's what the mindset is as opposed to anything else going in the background. But
Yeah.
he's like, yep, I'm getting out, I'm leaving. But there's so many questions that kind of pop up from this, right? Let's put aside the sexual harassment allegation or assault allegations, right?
Hmm.
And let's just talk about like the car here for a second, the team here for a second. I think Red Bull's in some hot water right now. Like
Hmm.
they as an organization are showing like some huge structural like cracks, right? Number one, you have the new engine regs coming in 2026, and
Hmm.
this is Red Bull's first time developing their own powertrain, right?
Right.
There are going to be hiccups. There are going to be hurdles, right? Red Bull is not they're not like a legacy engine manufacturer, right? They're
Hmm.
not like a Ford or a GM. Granted, they're getting technical advice from Ford, right?
Hmm.
For Red Bull powertrains, right? But there's a lot of rumors going on right now that the engine is not where it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
Adrian Newey is also, I think, a lot of the technical gurus, if you will, across the FIA or the F1 teams are not happy with these regs. So it's going to be more engine and power dependent, right? So then aero won't have as much of an impact on the
Hmm.
performance of the vehicle, right?
Right.
Um, Couple this with, just again, their inexperience with making engines and all this drama going on right now with, you know, there's like Camp Verstappen, Marco within Red Bull, and then you have like the ties within Red Bull who are also on Horner's side, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
like Team Austria. Dude, it's like
Mm-hmm.
so dramatic. And like
Yeah.
reading, so I just finished Adrian Newey's autobiography, How to Build a Car. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Would highly recommend. Every Formula One fan should have a copy. Um, Holy crap, he is not a man to be, mixing his fingers in politics. He does not like that kind of stuff. He is
Mm-hmm.
very about the technical part of the sport, the fun, like that's like the raw fun side, right? Because that is truly where you measure yourself, right, as being the
Mm-hmm.
best, not with the drama, right? So I can see how he probably has gotten to a point where he's like, I have no appetite for this. I'm done. We've done a lot of good work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, this leads us to the big question, though. What's next, right? Does he
Yeah.
stay in the sport
Mm-hmm.
or does he retire? If he does stay in the sport, holy crap, where is he
Mm-hmm.
going to go?
Right.
And there are two teams that pop out to me, and we will talk about that. But real quick, Gabe, let's. What are your thoughts on all this? Because like this took me out. This
Yeah.
was not on anyone's bingo card for this year.
Yeah, well, I think part of it first we have to really talk about like how do people know who Adrian Newey even is?
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Yeah,
mean like I'm a huge fan. I cannot name who designed the Aston Martin. I don't know who designed I don't know who designs the Mercedes. Like I don't off the top of my head I can't say. But Adrian Newey, I
you know
mean,
that
this
name.
guy, I mean, you know that name. He's been around for a really long time. He has the most, like, only him and Gordon Murray are the only two people that I know of that are car designers specifically. And I only know Gordon Murray because he designed the McLarens in the Senna era, and he
Mm-hmm.
was also the designer for the McLaren F1 street car.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, I would say that Adrian Newey's reputation is really cemented, at least recently,
Oh
has
yeah,
been generally cemented really because of this Red Bull, especially to new fans. Like because
absolutely.
we all know how dominant that car is. We know how
Mm-hmm.
fast it is. And so the person's like, who designed this who made this monster? It was Adrian Newey. And I think that, and from my perspective, I think you're right. It's like there's only a couple of paths he can take, right? He could retire from the sport completely if he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to. He is more within his right to do that. He has had a huge legacy. He would definitely doesn't feel like if he were to leave that he left anything on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, for him it could possibly feel that way.
Yeah,
Maybe he doesn't feel like his work is done, which would be for him to stay. But obviously this relationship with Red Bull is soured, so he has to go
big time,
somewhere else.
big time.
Um, I think that Adrian Newey knows his value, and I think everybody else knows his value
Oh
too.
yeah.
And so, even if his car that he designs doesn't end up being the car that wins a championship, it's going to be competitive.
Absolutely.
And it's going to give them valuable information no matter what. Like, you don't pull
Absolutely.
Adrian Newey in and then get a lemon. That's not going to happen unless your engine's terrible.
Yeah. Which has happened, right?
Which has happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. McLaren had a lot of that problem where they had a really decently aerodynamic and handling car, but
Mm-hmm.
it just had absolutely no power.
Yep.
So so at this point, honestly, like if let's go down the path. I mean, obviously, like, if he doesn't stay in the sport, if he just retires altogether, then
Mm-hmm.
they're just going to have to find a new designer. They're going to find somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if he does stay in the sport, which would be the much juicier,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sort of scenario,
I mean,
um,
can I
like,
just say, like, the amount of juice though would be like, do you remember the scene
Juicy.
from from Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, right? And
Uh-huh.
Boromir's and Faramir's father is like biting
Oh,
into those like
mhm.
cherry tomatoes, and
Yeah,
it's
the
just
cherry
like
tomato.
it's one of the most disgusting scenes I think I've ever seen in a film, right?
Yes.
But like, I mean, that's the level of juice we're talking about.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I
I
was
digress.
thinking like Sir Mix-a-Lot on top of a big giant juicy butt that looks like he's like James and the Giant Peach. That's the amount of juice I was thinking of.
Love it.
But I agree. So really, what we need to talk about right now is I have three questions
Mm-hmm.
that I kind of presented for this question. The first one is, where is he going? You know, like where could he go? You
Mm-hmm.
know, the next thing is like where would he be most effective if he were to go? And also
Yeah.
who can afford him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the team, I don't know about you, but I'm just going to put it out here that the
Mm-hmm.
team that I think would make the most sense, and also would be the most one of the more effective places for him to go, I think at this point,
Mm-hmm.
would to be for him to go back to McLaren.
Interesting. Cause
Because here's
okay,
the thing,
I'll listen.
he designed Mika Häkkinen's
Mm-hmm.
championship winning cars for McLaren.
Right.
He has an extensive history with McLaren. A McLaren can afford him. I mean, McLaren's got a
100%.
lot of money. It would also be very effective because look who's right up at the top. Like, I mean, yes, Ferrari is nipping at Red Bull's heels, but so has been McLaren.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've been right up on the podium all these like the races so far this season. Like they are primed and ready to have, to have somebody to have an Adrian Newey back in designing their car. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like I think they're right at that apex where they're like they've rebuilt. Now it's just like that crowning piece that could come
Mm-hmm.
into play. There's
Mm-hmm.
also that photo where he was at dinner and he had the McLaren hat on and they were like sitting with a bunch of his contemporaries. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's one of the first that comes into mind for me. And then obviously everybody else is talking about Ferrari being the thing. So
Mm-hmm.
who do you think? What was your sort of first impression? Like who would you think you would want to go with? Like where was your thought?
Um, real quick, I want to say to your McLaren point that
Uh,
McLaren was actually, if we do use your thought experiment, where's he going?
mhm,
Where would he be most effective? Who can afford him? The three that popped to mind instantly were McLaren, Ferrari, and Aston Martin. So
mhm.
I'm going to speak about Aston Martin and Ferrari, and then I'll come back to
Sure.
McLaren.
Yeah.
I think Ferrari makes the absolute most sense, right? I think Ferrari is reaching so deep into their bag to make all these kinds of things happen, right? Um, recall that Adrian Newey, when interviewed by Tom Clarkson on Beyond the Grid podcast, mentioned that two of his regrets in his career, or a few of his regrets in his career, are not working with Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, and working with Ferrari. And he's skirted the Ferrari position so many times over the last few decades
Hmm.
of his career within F1, right? So
Hmm.
him getting to work at Ferrari, that's two birds, one stone, right? And I think we would really be having a conversation of, okay, how many more championships can Lewis win before he retires?
Right.
And or how many championships can Leclerc win, right? Like it's
Right.
like the Leclerc dominance era, right? So that's kind of the easy, obvious one. Um, I think the only hurdle there is really just whether or not Adrian would feel comfortable working with Ferrari, given that they are in Italy, right? Like,
Hmm.
reading his book, he is a firm believer of being co-located, being where the work is, being where the action is, right?
Right.
Maybe Ferrari would be like, hey, we're going to fly you out and house you up, whatever you want. We're going to buy you a house here, whatever it
Hmm.
is. I don't know. The guy's also, I
Hmm.
think, what, like 65 or something like that. So,
Hmm.
he might also really just want to hang it up. The other option is Aston Martin. And yo, I you can be guaranteed like almost 100,000%
Hmm.
that Daddy Strollbucks has called up Adrian or put in so many feelers, right?
Hmm.
Like
Oh, that.
I'm sure that he already has. I think Dan Fellows is the technical guy. He's like the CTO technical lead over at Aston Martin, and he worked under Adrian Newey, right? And
Hmm.
publicly, they're saying that they're okay with, they're happy with their team they have in place. But it's like when Lewis when Ferrari was like, oh, do we keep Carlos Sainz or do we take Lewis? Like, come on, like
Yeah.
you're gonna take the goat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So Aston Martin would be in a very similar position. Publicly they're not going to say that out loud that they're going to dump Dan Fellows, but
Right.
they might want to bring on Adrian, right?
Right.
And Aston Martin can absolutely afford. Like I'm sure Lawrence Stroll was like, hey, whatever salary the other guys are giving you, double it, triple it, quadruple
Yeah.
it,
When your
and then
when
add
your
zeros to it.
when your net value begins with a B,
Hmm.
I'm sure you could just hand them a check and just be
Yeah.
like, "Here, name your price. Just,
Exactly.
don't put a B at the end of it.
Right.
Like, and I'm sure I know he's got deep pockets. Like, we know he's
Absolutely.
got deep pockets.
Absolutely. He bought a team for his son.
And yeah, and it would be an investment worth making for him. It's in his
Absolutely.
brain. You know what I mean? Like, that's
Absolutely.
who he wants. He wants
Yeah.
the best because obviously he wants his
Yeah.
team to be the best that he can be.
And
Yeah. And
and
then, like
also
you said, being able to work with Fernando Alonso. Like,
yes. Think about man, bro, like as exciting as it would be to see Adrian Newey and Ferrari and Lewis together, it would
mm,
be just as exciting to see Fernando, Aston Martin, and Adrian together. And think about it. Aston Martin's right in the UK, right? Like he does not have to move, you know? Like
mhm,
that is amazing, right? And he can
right.
really cement his legacy because I think there's also a thing too of like, oh, I never worked for the guys in red, right? Like Ferrari are the Yankees, right? You cannot like the Yankees. Ferrari is the
Mhm,
empire. You cannot like the empire. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Like
mhm,
you have to just you always lob stones at them. You know, you want to beat
mhm,
them. You want to take them down, right? So I don't know how he feels about that. Also, Ross Brawn was over at Ferrari, right? Like
right.
his kind of like arch nemesis car designer, right? So
Right.
it's kind of like, oh, do I take that spot? Even though it's his tenure was over like some time back, but still, it's like it's got the smell of Ross Brawn, right?
Mhm,
Um,
yeah.
and then to kind of circle back to McLaren, McLaren is a viable option. However, his tenure at McLaren ended so poorly, right?
Mhm,
And again, I cannot recommend How to Build a Car, his autobiography, enough because he talks about how how bad things got at the end there, right? And
mhm,
if that same structure's in place, if the same people are in place, if that same vibe is there, I don't know if he'd want to touch that. But
mhm,
that's my take on it. But yeah, I'm there with you. I think there's only just a handful of teams that can afford him and that are realistic. Your Williams, no, Williams can't do it. Even though it would be good to see him go back to Williams too, because
yeah.
he has some championship winning cars there.
Right.
Um, but again, that was another experience where he got effectively screwed, right? Like he did not
Mhm.
like how things were going down between Frank Williams and I forget, oh my God, the other homeboy's name, but not coming to my head right now. But same kind of thing. Um, he's not going to go to Haas, like
Right.
you know. So
No, he'll go to Alpine, and suddenly we'll just
I can
have
fix that.
it's yeah, yeah. Well, no, I'm sure he's looking at the Ferrari and thinking, I can fix that.
Hmm.
Yeah, honestly, like I feel like that the thing with Ferrari, and we've talked about this before too, that like Ferrari is a place where you either want to beat them or you want to be one of them. There's like no in
Hmm.
between.
Yeah.
And a lot of people look at like Ferrari as being either the first place they want to race and the last, you
Yeah.
know. There's this appeal
Yeah.
to trying to be the one to bring Ferrari back to where it's like
Hmm.
championship,
Hmm.
ways. And um I mean, obviously they have. I mean, even this year they have a solid lineup. They're also going to have a solid lineup next year. I mean,
Hmm.
say what you will about what Hamilton is doing. It has nothing to do with his driving. It is really just the car.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like Hamilton, we know he's a fast driver. We know he's capable. He's just not in a very competitive car, which
Hmm.
also leads to my next point. Outside of Adrian Newey leaving, is that apparently Max is going to
Dude.
be having a meeting after the Miami Grand Prix with Mercedes,
Yeah.
high executives from both teams. And the rumor is that he is being offered 150 million euros,
Sheesh.
a brand ambassadorship alongside George Russell, which he already has one of those Mercedes supercars, right?
Yeah.
So he's already halfway there. And apparently Helmut Marko is involved with it too, because apparently Helmut Marko is one of the reasons why he has to stay at Red Bull, I guess. Like,
Mm.
is he like financially tied up with him? Like, what's the deal there? But
So
apparently he's part of that conversation as well.
so Marco Verstappen feels that he owes a lot of his success to Marco, right? He is a man of loyalty. So he's like, look,
Mm,
this guy got me into this team, into the stable. I'm going to remain loyal to the end, even with all the nonsense that comes with Marco, right?
yeah.
So he's going to stay with him. But yeah, hearing this about Mercedes wanting to give him a brand ambassadorship and everything, if you're Lewis, how incensed must you feel, right? That
Right.
Lewis is just like, yeah, give me a brand ambassadorship, all this kind of stuff, right? And they're like, well, no, I don't know if we can do that right now for you, Lewis. But then they're gonna to entice Max Verstappen. this is what they'll do. They'll throw everything at him, right? Like I would I would be feeling pretty hot, man. I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to Ferrari and I'm going to destroy you guys, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But man, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that is a lot of money. And I mean, I think, and Max has already openly stated too that he doesn't just want money; he wants a competitive car. I mean, the guy
Right.
he wants to win more, and I don't blame him.
Right.
So really, I mean, it just depending on, we know Mercedes as a company has a lot of money to throw around.
Hmm.
You're not going to throw out that kind of number without being able to back it up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess it's going to be really interesting after the Miami Grand Prix to see kind of what comes out from that, because yeah, that's going to be really fascinating. Next thing I want to bring up is Nico Hulkenberg is officially leaving Haas.
Yes.
He's leaving Haas
Yes.
to go to Sauber in 2025, so next year. Because I know he was rumored to be the driver for Audi, so I guess they're just doing this early. But now
Hmm.
this leaves a big opening at Haas.
Hmm.
Um, and like, who's taking that hot seat? Like I
Yeah.
think Ferrari wants Theo Percher to be in there. Because I think they promised him a racing seat.
Yeah.
Um,
Over Ali, you think?
oh no, no, you're right. Yeah, you're no, that excuse me. Yeah,
Oh,
Ali
you're
Behrman
mixing it
is
up.
who they were talking
Right.
about. Yeah,
Right. 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 Yep. Yep.
yeah. I'm thinking about Theo for another reason.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, but yeah, no, he Ali Behrman, they promised him a seat, and I think, like, Haas is like the kind of sister team of Ferrari,
Hmm.
quote unquote. So yeah, I think the really the two questions here is who's gonna be alongside Hulkenberg at Sauber / Audi
Hmm.
next year. But also who's gonna take that Haas seat. I know Kevin Magnussen, I think his seat is really just dependent on who they get the next seat, because if they bring in a rookie
Yeah.
like Ali Behrman, they're not going to kick out Magnussen, because they learned their lesson. They're not doing two rookies again.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, if they were to bring in somebody, like, I guess they were talking about literally Nico and Bottas like swapping seats,
Mm.
which I don't really feel great with Bottas about, because I feel like
Yeah.
Bottas's career has just been continually going backwards. I don't think
Yeah.
he wants it to go backwards,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't want it to go backwards for the guy. I mean, he's won Grand Prix. You know
Yeah.
who hasn't? Nico Hulkenberg.
Hmm.
Um, so it wouldn't make any sense to drop Bottas. I think Bottas should stay there with the Audi team. But I know that they're like the idea of like a two German lineup, so people are like,
Hmm.
oh, it's going to be Sebastian Vettel or whatever. But I don't even. I think if Sebastian jumps back into the sport, I don't know where he'd go. I mean, I can only imagine him maybe jumping back to Red Bull. If, like,
Yeah.
imagine if like Christian Horner was just hung up the towel after all of this,
Hmm.
and then Vettel was just like, okay, well, I'll drive for you guys to rebuild again.
Hmm.
That would be kind of fun. But yeah, what do you think?
So I mean, yeah, no, it's a wild, wild game of musical chairs.
Hmm.
People who will probably be left out of all of this. Zhou Guanyu, I think he brings in money. He is
Hmm.
bringing brand awareness and the awareness of the sport to a
Yeah.
market that has like been starved for this, right?
Hmm.
Um, so where he goes, I don't know. Honestly, I think Bottas is the one who probably gets the boot from the
Hmm.
team, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, Even though I'm with you, I think Bottas needs to stay. He needs to be on the grid. And then we also are forgetting about Carlos Sainz, who just got booted from Ferrari. So where's he
Right.
gonna go, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
you also have
Yeah.
Logan Sargent, who honestly probably is gonna get replaced here real soon. Um, who's gonna sit alongside him? Pierre Gasly is a name that I've been seeing floated around because clearly he's not happy at Alpine, right?
Hmm.
Esteban Ocon isn't even promised a seat for next year, right? So I think the grid is going to look very different next year. And then
Yeah.
honestly, the seat we love talking about the most, Stroll. I don't know why he's there. I wish this guy would just
Hmm.
go do something else, because there are some drivers who I think we need to see like another season or two out of them before we can make a full like assessment about their
Yeah.
performance and ability in the sport.
Right.
And Stroll he's been here for 8 years and he has just done nothing but go backwards. You know,
Yep.
like if we're talking about someone who needs to go, it's him. Like at least
His car, yeah, it's like
at
his
least
car
Hulkenberg
performance has gone forward, but his results are
going
continuously
backwards.
going
Yeah,
backwards.
and
Yeah,
it's
it's like, come
stunning.
on, Dave.
It's
Yeah,
stunning, right? Like
yeah.
there are some really good drivers who,
Hmm.
there's like a huge bottleneck right now because of, I would say probably two or three drivers on the grid currently, right? And it sure would be nice if we had another team, right, who could,
Right.
bring some other drivers on the grid, but it's whatever.
Well, let's talk about Stroll for a minute here, because the Stroll backlash is real.
Oh,
Um,
people are not happy.
they
Yeah.
put out a video on their Instagram page of like it was Stroll talking about like showing up at the factory and like having a meet and greet with all the employees and seeing them and talking
Okay.
to them. Went on the comment section, and oh my god, it is literally just every single comment is he needs to leave Stroll. Like we need a better driver in that Aston Martin. Like, dude, no
Yeah.
one cares. And then like when you see that one which is like stop all the Stroll hate, and then in the comments underneath it, it's just like win a race and then we'll stop. Like, you know what I mean? Like the Stroll backlash is really intense, and
Yeah.
honestly, it's not unfounded. Like it's just
Yeah.
he. It's like you said. I mean, there are drivers where they were not given a chance to really get to come
And
to grips. I
develop.
mean, you think of like
Yeah.
Nick DeVries, right? Like Nick
Mm-hmm.
DeVries is not an untalented driver. He
Yeah.
was just not in a great situation, didn't really do great with the car,
Right.
and he got kicked immediately, you
Right.
know? I want to see like I mean, I don't wish harm on Lance Stroll, but like part of me wants him to be, I don't know, stuck in an airport for like a 48-hour layover before a
Like,
race, and
oh
they're like,
man,
well,
I missed my
we got to
flight.
get somebody else to jump in the car and drive, and then they jump in the car, and then they get like a podium finish alongside Alonso and do like an Aston 2-3 or something, and
Yeah.
then just be like, yep, well, yeah, Stroll, you can, Lance, you can just kind of stay where you're at.
Yeah.
We're gonna go another direction, you know. Because seriously, like I want to see what somebody else can do in that car that's not just Alonso. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And Stroll is not giving anybody that opportunity. He just keeps running into people physically and literally and
Yeah.
metaphorically. Um, yeah.
Who do you think the current plugs on the grid are right now? Like bottlenecks. Like who needs to go like right now?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, for me, Stroll is at
Sure.
the top,
Yeah.
right? Um, I think honestly, I feel like Logan has had he's had like two seasons.
This is his second season now.
This is his second season. Oh, I thought this was his
Yeah.
third season. Um, well, maybe not Logan then. Logan's just an easy target.
Mm-hmm.
Magnussen. I think that Magnussen at
Mm-hmm.
this point, it's just like he's had quite a few opportunities. He hasn't really capitalized on them, and I think that that is a seat that could be given off to another driver,
Mm-hmm.
giving them a chance. I think Esteban Ocon and
Mm.
um, and both well actually him both Esteban and Pierre I think are starting to get a bit stale.
Mm.
They're not really showing any sort of real surprise. They just keep causing problems,
Mm.
and that's not what you want as a driver. You want to surprise people. You don't want to disappoint them.
Okay. You say that's
So
true of both Pierre and Esteban? I could see Esteban, but Pierre,
yeah,
I can,
yeah,
thinking back to
maybe
his AlphaTauri days.
yeah. Pierre less to a degree as far as like getting in the way of people,
Mm-hmm.
but more just like not being able to pull out the right kind of results
Mm.
that he should be doing.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I like if I was given a choice, I would take Pierre over Esteban every day. Like
Okay.
I don't understand the SD bestie thing. He's never come across to me in any way as like relatable or likable. Like
Mm-hmm.
Pierre is he's kind of feels kind of like that sort of Tinder guy, like kind of I don't know how to describe it, like smarmy kind of player dude,
Mm.
like he's like that guy that would like take you out on the one Tinder date, do some fancy thing, and then like just gaslight you until you find out that he's been dating other people. Like he kind of gives off that sort of vibe, but at the same time, like he's also like been really talented driver. He had that sort of redemption arc by getting into Red Bull and then failing miserably and going back. So yeah, I think that honestly, I would say the strongest contenders in my brain are obviously Stroll, but then I would also say Magnussen. I think Zhou Guan Yu hasn't really gotten too much of an opportunity to really prove what he
Hmm.
can do. He's just been very he's like the perfect like neutral. You know what I
Mm,
mean?
hmm.
Like he's just right in that middle. Like he's not doing anything bad, but he's also not doing anything great. He's just
Hmm.
like consistency is like his seemingly his bag.
Mm.
So so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. Like Stroll, Magnussen, probably at the end of the season, probably Sargent,
Mm,
Esteban Ocon, and I would say Zhou Guan Yu. Those are kind of the ones that I look at and say like, okay, we need to see something really good. Oh, and I feel so bad saying this, but Danny Ricciardo, like he was having
yeah.
a good weekend
Hmm.
last race weekend, and then it got, the DNF did not help, but it'll really depend on how he finishes up the season, because
Yep.
I can think of like five, six other people who should be coming up, right?
Yeah.
Or who should get a shot, and it sucks
I
when you
yeah.
have just so few seats available to go around.
It's true. I honestly wish Danny Ricciardo would go to IndyCar. I think he would have so much fun there.
Or
You
NASCAR,
know,
he would kill it.
or the NASCAR. NASCAR
Like,
or IndyCar, I mean, those are like the vibe is there for Danny
hmm,
Ricciardo. People would love him. I
yeah.
mean, people already love him. And are you kidding me? Do you think like imagine if Danny Ricciardo went to IndyCar? Just think of the amount of people that would start to pay attention to IndyCar because Danny
Oh yeah,
Ricciardo's there.
it'd blow up.
It would be
It would blow
huge.
up. Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
the meet and greet lines at the races
Man.
would be, wow, it would
Yeah.
be crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
hell, I'd love to meet Danny Ricciardo and shake his
Yeah.
hand. That'd be amazing.
Mm.
Um,
All right.
um,
That's my best
um,
Danny Ricardo.
yeah. A couple more things I want to touch on in F1, and then I want to get to this IndyCar news. One, I heard in good news, Mick Schumacher is apparently rumored to be possibly driving for Prema in the IndyCar series when they jump over to there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if he doesn't get a drive in 2025, which is a possibility. I mean, if he were to replace, if he were to jump into that Mercedes seat,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe if he got the drive for Aston Martin, if Stroll left, like that would be great. But if he doesn't, he's apparently a prime candidate for that team,
Mm-hmm.
which would also be great. I'd love to be able to see Mick Schumacher in an open wheel car again and
Yeah.
driving around. That'd be fantastic. Um, but the other little bit of news I wanted to mention too, and this one I'm kind of relates to what we were talking about just before. There was a rumor that Williams might replace Logan Sargent mid-season with
Mm-hmm.
Kimi Antonelli, who's like the young, Mercedes driver, really promising talent, and I guess Mercedes is kind of itching to get him into a car and get him
Mm.
trained up.
If only there were
Um,
another team.
yeah, if only there was another team on the grid.
Mm.
I know, 100%, man. Speaking of that though, well, I'll talk a little bit about that later, but Andretti is definitely making a lot of moves to try and
Oh yeah.
be in F1.
They're
Um,
hiring like crazy right now throughout the UK.
yeah.
I was just looking
And
at the careers page the other day.
oh yeah, and also too, I mean, they literally in the IndyCar series, they're being told to call them Andretti Global now. So like
Mm.
even the name change is
Mm-hmm.
very specifically orienting them because I think they're at this point where there's like, you know what, screw you guys, we're just gonna
Yep.
do it anyway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, if Andretti came into it, I mean, I'm sure they would have their own possible drivers that they could take. There's a couple people racing for them now that could be
Mm-hmm.
great choices, uh, but yeah, that's F1 for you, just
Mm-hmm.
being buzzkills. Um, I'd like to say before I move on, you and I, we're definitely going to do a video soon for everybody, deep diving into the new car regulations for 2026.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We've been talking about
But
that for a
just as
bit.
like a little first impressions, like what about these regulations do you think is seemingly like what's exciting about them? Is there anything that's really exciting, or is you think it's going to be a big enough of a
Um,
shakeup?
so I think the big thing is that we have a new constructor coming in with Audi, right? That's
Right.
awesome. Um, in addition to the cars are also getting a little like a wee bit smaller, right? Which I think
Hmm.
is the direction it needs to go.
Right.
I would say that's probably the biggest thing so far, you know.
Yeah.
Um, looking at some of the engine stuff, it's like I don't know if why we're going the route of, I think we're going more hybrid or at least more reliance on the electrical energy recovery system, right?
Mhm.
So what is that doing for the sport? I don't know because is like the technology and the research and development out of that, is that really feeding into road cars, or do we want to make this a spectacle, right? And
Right.
that's kind of the question. Who is this serving, right? Is Audi, Honda, Renault, Mercedes, um, uh, I'm forgetting one. I'm forgetting one. Ferrari. Are these guys actually using this technology and putting it in their road cars? Because if not,
Right.
then okay, let's just admit what it is. It's a show. It's
Right.
an entertainment spectacle. Let's just go the other direction,
Right.
And what would that look like? So, um, and it's a little frustrating too, just given that if you put a cost cap on a sport as far as the development goes, in addition to making it very strict, having very strict like rules about how you can actually develop your car, aren't you kind of developing and designing the solution to a certain extent, as
Right.
opposed to saying this is the box you have to be within, unlimited money, or you only have so much money but unlimited design opportunity, right? Like going to either end versus being in the middle. Because if you're in the middle, it's just kind of you get like you get the zero side pod concept, right?
Right. Right.
You get the block
Right.
car.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm kind of excited. I agree, and so does Adrian Newey as well. He has openly said that like F1's kind of move towards smaller, lighter cars is something that he supports.
Hmm.
Um, I think I would agree. I think that the new cars, at least the concepts that I've seen for the new cars, they look really cool.
Hmm.
The wings are a little smaller, but the sides, they have these huge like side trays coming out. And I think, and part of this is I remember there's a shift in the way that the aerodynamics are flowing.
Hmm.
Because right now they sort of fly out and around the back of the vehicle,
Yeah, they wanted to
which
go up.
creates, yeah, which like right now creates a lot of like wash along the side. So it's like they can follow behind effectively, but then like getting around them and passing them is like, something completely different.
Hmm.
Or if they're following them like we saw with Norris, where when we were coming around that long bend, he was in that kind of dirty air and it just
Hmm.
washed his front end out and he just
Hmm.
went, he went along, he lost his grip.
Yep.
So the new regs, like you said, they're going to try and be up and over and kind of away. But what that creates, right, is a problem where now rather than having that aerodynamic grip to be able to create side pressure to kind of keep the car in line to be able to make those turns really quick, now all that pressure directing the air up and over is putting more pressure downward, but not necessarily laterally, right? So then
Right. So
now
your front end gets squirrely and twitchy.
yeah. So
Yeah.
now it's all about mechanical grip. It's about like what
Hmm.
the actual suspension setup and the tires are actually going to do to kind of hold the car in
Right.
line. And honestly, I mean, I'm excited for whatever they're coming up with. I think these
Yeah.
things are looking cool, and like you said, I'm really excited for Audi to come in and just kind of throw a wrench into the works a bit and see what's going to
Yeah.
happen. So
Yeah. By
yeah,
the way,
so good moves with that.
I gotta say, I was almost moved to tears hearing your explanation there because you did a beautiful job, Gabe. You're
Oh,
making this engineer proud.
all right. Well, I appreciate it. I haven't taken a single engineering class. Um,
This engineering
well,
class of life.
right. Um, so now I want to move on to this really juicy stuff
Oh,
that
let's
has
do
been
it.
going on.
And not even an
So
F1.
not even in F1. We're going to talk about IndyCar, which honestly I have been recently really enjoying watching the races and content that comes up. Obviously, there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons, but IndyCar is just like it's like one of those things where it's like, man, you're so close to the answer.
Hmm.
Like just come on, like you can do it. It's like you're watching like a kid with like a circle peg hovering over like a square hole or a
Yep.
circle hole, and he keeps putting it over the circle and then hesitating. You're like, come on, man, you're right there. That's how IndyCar feels. It's like they're so close at getting the right formula, but like there's just one or two things that keep happening that it's just like, why are you making this decision? But anyway, the big news I want to talk about is this huge Penske cheating scandal that happened. Um, so essentially, just like a quick breakdown. IndyCar has push to pass, right? Which is essentially a certain amount of time that they have to give extra power. It's kind of like how the KERS system was in F1 early on, right? It was like regenerating battery power, and then they'd have that to press, to kind of, and F1 has like the overtake, right? And you have that little bit of extra power. But in IndyCar, they have a little timer for it, and if you run out of that timing amount of power, like that's it, you're done. You don't have any more push to pass. And in the rules and the regulations, there is a thing that says you can't use push to pass on the restarts. Like that's one of the places you can't push it. But they did the thermal $1 million quote unquote challenge a while ago, which wasn't for any points. It wasn't even for $1 million. It was like just, it was just this weird exhibition thing. Is kind of a disaster. But at the thermal challenge, they allowed push to pass during restarts. That was like a one exception, and they had a code embedded in the system that allowed that for that to happen. Well, apparently Penske didn't take the code out, and so they not even did they didn't take the code out. They had the code. It was during the testing while they were at thermal too, right? So like they had this code in the system. And they didn't take it out for the St. Petersburg Grand Prix race. And so, essentially, the 3 Penske cars, which is Josef Newgarden, Scott McLaughlin, and Will Power, at the restart, they had access to push to pass, which they weren't supposed to have access to. But they did. It'd be like if in F1 they had DRS before the DRS system was activated, right? And Josef Newgarden used it multiple times. Scott McLaughlin only used it once for like 1.9 seconds or something. And Will Power didn't use it at all, but they all had access to it. And so this wasn't discovered until they had run the Long Beach race, and they had noticed in the data that they had it there. And they was like, wait, that's weird. And when they went back and checked St. Petersburg, they saw that not only did they have it in the system, they left the code in, but the drivers had used it. And apparently Josef Newgarden specifically, there's a little light indicator on the steering wheel that lets you know whether you have it ready.
Yeah.
He didn't want that light there. So like that was like a sort of like his sort of like I think kind of covering himself a little bit. And so the result of this,
trying to make the light go away.
right. So the result
I'm also going faster.
oh man. Well, see, and that's the funny part. So the result of this was Newgarden and McLaughlin were disqualified from the race. And Will Power only had like a 10-point. He had a 10-point points reduction.
Yeah.
And then they were all fined, right? So Penske immediately were like, "Yep, okay." Like they didn't fight it. They weren't like, "Oh, like we're gonna protest this." They were like, basically, like we're caught. Yeah. Josef Newgarden does this press conference at the beginning of Barber that was this weekend.
Yeah.
And I mean, he says he was like having sleepless nights, which okay, that's a bummer, but also he was claiming that he didn't know that he couldn't use it. And like, and that like, like that he wasn't aware. And both Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward were like, dude, you've been racing in this series for like 10 years. Are you kidding? Like even Pato was like, dude, I haven't read the regulations, but guess what? My team tells me that I'm not supposed to have it in be able to do it during restarts. And they say it in the driver's briefing every race that we can't use it during restarts.
Yeah.
And so they called BS on Newgarden. And because even Scott McLaughlin was like, yeah, I used it and it's regrettable and I shouldn't have, but whatever, I'm going to move on. Josef Newgarden was like, oh, I didn't know. Like, I wasn't sure. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have. And it's just like, dude, come on, muscles. Like, what are you doing? Like, it was just such a, I mean, Penske has a pretty extensive history of cheating. So I'm not completely surprised that it was Penske that was caught doing this. Even at the Formula E Grand Prix in Portland, they had a cheating scandal there too. So like, Penske's always kind of trying to thread these rules. I mean, but yeah. The qualifying results was, McLaughlin and Will Power were, on the first two spots for qualifying for Barber. So
Hmm.
they bounced right back. Newgarden got like knocked out the second round. So like I think he mentally is just not completely, completely there. But yeah, man, what a scandal! Like that is just like
Yeah,
apparently they haven't done something like this hasn't happened. Like they haven't had a disqualification from a race in like 30 years.
yeah, that it's
Like
pretty bad. Do you remember? I don't know if you've actually ever seen this, but it's from Chappelle's stand up. I think it's Killing Him Softly. Where he's talking about how he's hanging out with his white friends, right? He's like, "Oh man, if I as a black guy, if I get pulled over, it's crazy. Like I can't just be talking reckless to a cop, right?" And
mhm.
then he's like, "If I were a white guy, my white friend gets pulled over, and he talks to the officer. He's like, 'I'm sorry, officer. I didn't know I couldn't do that.'" This reeks. This reeks of that,
Uh-huh.
right? Of just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I didn't know I couldn't use that button." Like,
Yeah.
just
Right. Oh yeah, no, well, he also claimed that he like pushed it out of I think like even Scott McLaughlin was just like, yeah, I pushed it out of habit. I'm like, out of habit?
mm,
Like what? So you're
mm.
so like even when you don't have it, you're
He's
pressing it,
pushing
hoping that something happens. Like,
It's like we're hoping for the Nas.
you know, yeah. It's like when you're trying to pull the door on the car and your friend
Yeah.
hasn't unlocked it yet, and
Yeah.
you're just like, oh, sorry, man, it's a
All right.
habit. Like,
1, 2, 3. Wait, you're three of
wait,
my three.
I mean, for real, like, yeah, it was so
Ridiculous.
ridiculous, but like
Oh my
because of that,
God.
like Scott McLaughlin was knocked down to last place. I mean,
Mm.
he like last place. And so they got to really fight to recover, because I thought it was going
Yeah.
to be Penske's year after those first couple of races. And
Mm-hmm.
apparently, like Colton Herta had taken a screenshot of his onboard and sent it to Kyle Kirkwood and was like, "Dude, man, it looks like they're using push to pass?" And they're like, "Oh, there's no way it could be that." And then like 2 hours later,
Yep.
it's like, "Yep, no, it was. They were
Oh
using it."
man.
So
Oh man.
yeah, man, that's
Unbelievable.
really, really wild. I'm excited to see how the rest of that season shakes out. But
Yeah.
it was funny watching every single session at IndyCar for Barber. They're just like, if you haven't been tuned in and you don't know what's going on here, we're gonna talk about it again. And every time they interview the Penske drivers, they're just like, yeah. So how do you feel? How'd the race go out there today after all the stuff that's been going on? And I'm just
Unbelievable.
thinking, like, they're just gonna keep doing that, and it's like the last race of the season. And it's like, yeah, so how did the season shake out after the whole scandal with the push to pass? It's like
Oh
I
man.
can imagine, like, just like, dude, just leave me alone. Let me keep driving. Like, yeah, I screwed up, whatever.
Yep. Yep.
Um, yeah. So
Unbelievable.
so who knows how that's gonna go. But time will tell. On the bright side in IndyCar, Tio Pourchaire, are the knockoff McLaren's favorite friend and driver, is racing for McLaren. It was his first time in IndyCar at Long Beach
Mm-hmm.
ever, and he was the fastest. He was the most did the most move, like the
Yeah.
biggest mover, right? Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Like
And Long
these
Beach is a
rookies, man.
fun track too. That's
It
a really
is.
I've been in that Grand Prix twice now.
Yeah.
Um, it's so fun. Like the there's a section of the track that goes under the bridge and it is just rumbling through there and there's some good overtaking that happens there, especially there's a hairpin where some good action happens. But
Mhm.
yeah, really awesome. I'm really happy for him. Yeah,
What
it's
is
good to see him getting this opportunity in this sport, right? Like,
right?
because he's not coming up to F1 anytime soon, right?
No, 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 no. But also, man, what is with the young rookie drivers this year,
Mm,
man?
mm,
Like we had
yeah.
Ali Behrman, there's Theo Pourchaire, and then you have like who is there? There's another driver that came in an IndyCar too that was from F2. And it was like his first time at Barber. He's like killing it. Like it is like the year of the rookies, man. Like that's why I think that I think Mercedes is so itching to get Kimi Antonelli into a
Yeah,
car
just to
because
see
I
what he
think
can
they're
do.
just seeing the potential for all of that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, last thing I want to touch on, and this was just kind of crazy to me. Um, because but also it kind of makes me feel pretty good about IndyCar as a sport in general. Um, Apparently at the Indianapolis 500, there was Potential team that wanted to put a pro JFK Jr. / Donald Trump
Mm.
political action committee thing on their car um, for the race, and the Indy 500 was like, "Yeah, no, we're not going to do that."
Yeah.
Um, because for obvious reasons. I mean, they don't want they're not in the business of putting out overt like political candidacy,
Yeah.
candidacy messaging.
Yep, yep, yep.
But also like, man, that's just like I mean, why would they put those two on the same car? I mean, aren't they both like running for the same office?
You
Like,
know,
why would you do like this doesn't make any sense to me.
yeah. Yep.
It's
I think that answers the question. It's really stupid. I don't think any sport in any venue, doesn't matter what it is, will really allow for political statements, you know.
no,
Um,
no.
just it's one thing if it's protest, but yeah, yeah,
It's different when it's like, yeah,
especially
it's different
this,
when it's, yeah,
especially with Trump, right? Because he's
right.
a certain brand, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's different when it was like, Lewis Hamilton, taking a political stance over a really
Hmm.
serious issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's another when it's just like, oh, these people are running for political office. You should support them. And here's
Hmm.
their car. It's like, no, like if it was a
Yeah,
Biden Harris car, like it would be the same thing. Like, no,
yeah.
they're
Like
not
don't
going to
put
do that.
yeah, yeah,
Don't put that on there,
yeah.
you know? Um,
These guys are in the business of making money, and I don't,
right.
I don't think claiming your allegiance towards one party or another helps you obtain that money.
Right. Right. And well, and along those lines too, and this is kind of goes back to what I was saying with like IndyCar being so close to just like being being like the doing the right thing
Hmm.
and then just like almost missing it. Apparently Donnie was supposed to call out the start your engines call
Oh
at
my
the
God.
thermal club race, but
Ugh.
they didn't do that literally the night before the event. They're like, yeah, no, never mind. And I can only imagine be part of it because I'm pretty sure there are several drivers on the field that would have a pretty strong objection to that, even though like being the thermal club, like just
Yeah.
being a giant neighborhood of a bunch of like rich people in like
Hmm.
their expensive cars and their private racetrack, like yeah, I would imagine sure that politically they're probably leaning in his direction, which would make sense. But yeah, close call there. I
Yeah.
would definitely have
Yeah. Good move,
IndyCar would have
guys.
lost some yeah, they would have lost some kudos from me for that. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people probably would have been very upset by that.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, I feel very I feel much more I feel like really attached to IndyCar a bit more this year, having
Hmm.
watched through these races, because
Oh, you're invested. We're
honestly
invested now.
we are invested. It is really seriously fun racing. They're really enjoyable um races to watch, but also they don't have a lot of the problems that F1 has.
Hmm.
Like nobody complains about the cars not being able to pass each other.
Hmm.
There's no problems with like aero loss. Like there's some like kind of outwash that can happen,
Yeah.
with like dirty air, but like in generally there's a lot of passing that can happen in
Hmm.
IndyCar. And I think a lot of it too is also just that you have cars that are pretty much on an even playing field.
Yeah.
Like they're all the same power, the same body panels. Like there's no aerodynamic differences between the cars. And at Barber during qualifying, like the top 19 positions were only separated by a second.
See,
Like
that's
that's
that
wild.
that's really nice. That is really, really nice. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of to relate that back to F1, I've been seeing a lot of debate and chatter about how championship points should be doled out in the sport, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's been a big conversation. I mean, Martin Brundle said something, I think it was last week, saying like, "Oh, championship points is something they should be prized. They're prized possessions, not they're not like participation trophies." But it's like, sure, but at the same time, like, what is the difference between someone finishing P10 versus P9 right now in F1? It means nothing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or P8 or P7, right? Like, if I finish P14 consistently, there should be a marker of that over someone who finishes P19 almost all the time, but one time they got P10. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that, them getting P10 gives them a championship point, but I've been finishing consistently ahead of them, but the points don't reflect that. You know what I mean? So
Right.
this is just for a more accurate understanding of things, and I appreciate that IndyCar like thinks about that, right? It's not just
Right.
about the fight at the front; it's about the fight at the back
Right.
and the fight in the middle. Like,
Right.
cool.
Right. And well, like, Pluggo, we did an episode, right? Where we
Yeah,
talked,
talking about
we did
this. Yeah.
Dana's analysis and we ran the F1 points, the results with basically with the IndyCar point
Mm-hmm.
system. And the
It's,
biggest changes
yeah.
were at the middle, in the middle and towards the bottom.
Yeah.
Like the top stayed pretty much where it was.
Yeah.
People are going to win the lion's share. They're going to win the lion's share. But like, especially when you're talking about like amounts of money, like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense to me if you were Sauber and you were for Williams, right? Let's say
Mm-hmm.
like Sauber has one top 10 finish,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but then they DNF every single race,
Right.
and then Williams is finishes like P11, P12, like for
Right.
like the entire season.
Right.
They are suddenly not getting any of the money, and
Right.
Sauber is getting all of the money because
Right.
they had the one time they finished ahead of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't make any sense. That
Yeah.
and that's where the points. That's where the problem is. That's why I have that problem that Martin Brundle cut a participation trophy. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, it's not participation. It is literally talking about who is doing a better
Right.
job.
Like we're ranking
know?
people, yeah, and there's money. I mean, if that's the case, then just average out the position, right? Like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
if someone and use that as your point marker, right? Like there needs to be some other way of figuring this out because sometimes, like, just like you said, it's not. It sucks for the people at the back, like big time.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you will do everything you can to try and get that point and it just won't happen. But then there's like one fluke in a race and your rival gets a top 10 finish and all of a
Right.
sudden they're above you.
Right.
And it's just like that can't be fair.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That can't be right. I'm not into that. It's just not
Yeah.
it can't be sustainable,
Right.
Yeah, it's
I
really
mean,
frustrating.
think about the season where Esteban Ocon won in Hungary, right?
Yeah.
Like you mean to tell me that he is much better than whoever the drivers were within his immediate vicinity of that race, Like that was kind of a stroke
Right.
of luck, right?
It was. Yeah, well, there was a huge accident
Yeah.
because it was raining and like a ton of people got knocked
And
out of that race. And
and
so
Fernando saved him there, right? Like Lewis
yes.
would have won that race if it weren't for Fernando,
Yeah,
right?
him and Vettel would have passed Ocon. Both
Yeah.
of them would have
Yeah.
if Fernando hadn't fought them off.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like it was just like those are little things too that you forget about. Like
Hmm.
you forget how a person can be like the teammates and how that dynamic works. Like,
Hmm.
like people like to call Fernando the bad guy and I get it, but like Fernando has had so many opportunities, so many moments where he's like told his teammates like, "Hey, like do this, like, enter this corner faster," or
Hmm.
or he's fended off other drivers,
Right.
to get wins. Like, team participation and team cooperation is important. And when you put all that effort into it and you're not getting even 1 point for a
Yeah.
race, I mean, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. That I don't like this whole conservative, like we don't want to change it because we don't feel like it.
Right.
It's bad. So
Right. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening to another episode of F1 or F off. We should have like fighting game like sound effects here. I think that might sound really cool. Yeah.
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 All right.
You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to hit us up, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter, Threads, and whatever else at F1 or F off. Notice I didn't say the X today because this is an older script. But also, everyone calls it Twitter, so suck it, Elon.
Right.
Email us at F1 or F off podcast at gmail.com. Give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast, and be sure to share it with family and friends.
Yeah, I swear Tesla better not even come close to touching any of our favorite motorsports, or they will instantly be the villains for
Man, so real quick, all right, this is also a soft launch for our economics podcast, but I mean, Tesla has been extremely overvalued for a very long time, right? Like they are a company that produces real vehicles, like real tangible goods, but with the valuation of a tech company, right?
Mhm,
And it was just a matter of time before it all came tumbling down. And
mhm.
we'll see how far this goes down, like how far it comes crumbling. But
I
We'll
think
see.
the one thing Tesla did, I think, is they proved to other domestic makers that you can make a car that's cool that other people want to drive that's electric.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that their cars are good because they're not.
Yeah, I
They're
mean,
just
every
prototype.
car is yeah, Teslas are kind of like Ferraris in the sense that they're all a little unique and different, right? But they don't have the Ferrari finish, right? Like they
Well,
have
like,
some really poor quality control issues from my understanding.
yeah, but like, like Ferraris have excitement, they have vibrancy, they have flair.
Sure.
Teslas are just like it reminds me of the Sonic Care toothbrush I just got. It's got two buttons, it does a thing, but like it has no personality. It's just there.
Mm,
And that to me, it's like doesn't matter what color you paint your Tesla. You could paint it chrome. Does not matter. You look in the interior of those things, and it's just like a kid drawing a car.
mm.
Like, actually, no, that's not fair to the kid. Kids would put like lasers and stuff. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
subject for a whole new podcast.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thanks for
Yeah.
listening, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of your week, whatever you're doing.
Peace.
Peace out.